What's up, book nerds? My name is Tara, and this is my very belated August wrap-up. We all know what wrap-ups are about, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump on into this. The first book that I read in August was The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood. This is the story of Charmaine and Stan, who are living in a pretty crappy economy, so they get the opportunity to join a project or a community around a prison called Positron, where people have an agreement to get a very nice house and all of their needs provided for, and they live in the house for a month, and then they have to go live and work in the prison for the other month. And Charmaine, our main character, falls in love with the man who lives in her house when she's not there. It was okay. It was an interesting read. It certainly has a lot of layers, and it certainly has a lot of social commentary to it, which I always appreciate, but I found myself slogging through it because it felt a little bit like really trying to capture the hipster millennial attitude about things, and it kind of missed the mark a little bit with its wackiness. We get why people would want to do it, but we don't get why we told them that a company would want to run this program. So I felt there were some plot holes and some unbelievable aspects to it, but ultimately I did give it 3 out of 5 stars because Margaret Atwood is always enjoyable, and I mean, I liked the book enough. Next, I read You by Carolyn Kepnes, which was one of the first books of the year that I've given 5 out of 5 stars to, and I will do a full review of this later, but I will say, you know, not literary fiction by any means, but definitely a can't put down kind of read for me. The third book I read was Enter Title Here by Rahul Kanakia. This is the story of a Stanford-bound girl who is extremely high-achieving Indian American and decides that she is going to write a novel about what it's like for her, focusing on getting friends and getting a boyfriend and living sort of a normal high school life. But we have a very, very unlikable protagonist, and she's pretty much unlikable throughout. I think it's a really interesting, diverse read. I think the format of it, being a story about writing a story, was really interesting because she's writing the story as she's in the middle of it. So there's a lot of meta narrative going on there about, well, in a couple of pages I should have an inciting event so that things change and flip everything on its head. And then that's exactly what would happen in the story. So watching that and hearing her talk about her writing choices was really cool. 3 out of 5 stars. It met my expectations, but it didn't exceed them. The fourth book I read was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This is also one that I plan to do a full review of, mostly because there's a lot of hype around it, but also because I just have some complicated thoughts that I want to bring up on this story. So I did give it 3 out of 5 stars, and I'll give you more details on exactly where that comes from in a later video. Book number 5 was Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. It's a project that Laura Bates started in the UK where people wrote about their everyday instances of sexism. Sexism in the media, sexism in school, in the workplace, in relationships, in their body expectations. There were chapters that were kind of divided by all of those different elements, and she had little anecdotes from the stories that were left on her website, as well as then she goes into greater commentary. It was nice to hear the stories, but also that extended commentary on what's really happening and why this is problematic. I love reading things about feminism. Nothing here surprised me or blew me away. These are things I hear about all the time and talk about with my friends all the time, but I certainly felt like I got my money's worth listening to it. So that made it a solid 3 out of 5 stars for meeting my expectations, but not really exceeding them. My sixth read was The Notorious RBG, The Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg by Erin Carmen. This book was really cool because it was taken with a nod to the Notorious B.I.G., so the chapter titles were nods to his songs and his life and just the title and the way that RBG is talked about. And I also just, you know, RBG is a pretty badass lady. I just gained so much more of a respect for her through reading this. Now, ultimately, this is not a very in-depth look at her life. It's very short. I think the audiobook was like 5 hours long. So it has its place on the shelf, but it's not very comprehensive. It hits the highlights of her life. The little shtick, the little Notorious B.I.G. thing was cool, and so for that it was a fun read, not necessarily life-changing one, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And finally, I read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Now, I know this is technically a short story and one that I've been meaning to read for a very long time because it's kind of a classic feminist piece of literature. You hear it referenced a lot. And it's about madness. This woman experiences separation. She's being taken out to the countryside. She's left there every day. She's in this bedroom and she starts to just like see things in the walls, and it just kind of spirals down from there. Obviously, it's a classic piece of work. It stood the test of time. It's feminist. It has all the things I want. I was definitely intrigued by this and would like to maybe read it a second time or do some research and look up more about it. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It didn't blow me away like The Awakening by Kate Chopin did the first time I read it, but it certainly made me think, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. So I did give this 4 out of 5 stars, and I do recommend you read it. It's a very short read if you're looking to read some feminist short stories. So those are the books that I read in August. 3 stars is not bad. 3 stars means I liked it. It met my expectations. So overall, a good reading month. I think things are getting better in terms of the reading slump. I'm kind of out of it, I think, reading some really interesting things right now, and just looking forward to all the things on my shelf for the fall. So if you've read any of the books I've covered here, please let me know in the comments below. And as always, book nerds, thank you for watching. I will see you next time. Do you see the theme here of like 3-star reads taking over my life? It's very hard lately for things to exceed my expectations, or even just slightly exceed them, like to be slightly better than I think, which is a 4-star read, which I think is why I've been in such a massive reading slump lately. Like, I don't know why books just aren't as good as they used to be anymore.